Before starting the story, let us know where you're watching from and what time you're watching. The town that exists only at night. The first time I heard about Black Hollow, it was from an old, tattered postcard I found in a dusty antique shop on the outskirts of nowhere. The postcard was faded, its edges curled and brittle, but the image on the front was unmistakable, a quaint, picturesque town bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. The caption beneath it read, "Black Hollow, where the night never ends." I turned the postcard over, expecting to find a message or a date, but there was nothing. Just the faint imprint of a postmark that had long since faded into obscurity. Intrigued, I asked the shopkeeper about it. He was an elderly man with a face like cracked leather and eyes that seemed to look right through me. "Black Hollow," he muttered, his voice low and gravelly. "Ain't no such place. Not anymore, leastways." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my curiosity piqued. He shook his head, refusing to say more, and I left the shop with the postcard tucked into my coat pocket. It wasn't until later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, that I realized I couldn't shake the image of that town from my mind. There was something about it, something haunting, something wrong. And so, against my better judgment, I decided to find it. The journey to Black Hollow was anything but straightforward. The town didn't appear on any map, and the few people I asked either didn't know of it or refused to speak its name. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an old, forgotten road deep in the woods that I began to feel like I was getting closer. The road was overgrown, its asphalt cracked and crumbling, but there was a strange energy to it, a pull that I couldn't ignore. I drove for hours, the trees growing denser and the air growing colder with each passing mile. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the road, and I started to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake. But just as I was about to turn back, I saw a sign, weathered and barely legible, that read, "Welcome to Black Hollow. Population?" My heart raced as I drove into the town. It was exactly as it had appeared on the postcard, a collection of quaint, old-fashioned buildings bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. But there was something off about it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The streets were empty, the windows dark, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. I parked my car and stepped out, my breath visible in the cold night air. The town was beautiful, in a way, but it was a beauty that felt unnatural, almost otherworldly. The buildings were perfectly preserved, as if frozen in time, and the streets were lined with gas lamps that flickered with an unnatural light. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty streets. There was no response. I walked further into the town, my footsteps echoing against the cobblestone streets. The silence was oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. As I explored, I began to notice strange details that sent a chill down my spine. The windows of the buildings were all dark, but I could have sworn I saw faces pressed against the glass, watching me. The gas lamps cast long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own, and the air was filled with a faint, almost imperceptible hum, like the sound of distant whispers. I was about to turn back, to leave this place and never return, when I saw a figure standing at the end of the street. It was a man, tall and thin, dressed in an old-fashioned suit. He was standing perfectly still, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice trembling. The man didn't respond. He simply stood there, motionless, as if waiting for something. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "Can you help me? I'm looking for..." Before I could finish, the man raised his hand and pointed down a narrow alleyway. His hand was pale, almost translucent, and his fingers were unnaturally long. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. The alleyway was dark and foreboding, but something about the man's gesture compelled me to follow. I took a deep breath and stepped into the alley, the darkness closing in around me. The alleyway led to a small, secluded square. In the center of the square was a fountain, its water black and stagnant. Surrounding the fountain were more figures, men, women, and children, all dressed in old-fashioned clothing. They were standing perfectly still, their faces pale and expressionless, their eyes fixed on me. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What is this place?" The figures didn't respond. They simply stared at me, their eyes empty and lifeless. I turned to leave, but the way I had come was now blocked by more figures. They were closing in on me, their movements slow and deliberate. I could feel the cold radiating off of them, and the air was filled with the sound of their whispers, whispers that seemed to come from all around me, echoing in my mind. "Get away from me," I shouted, backing away until I was pressed against the fountain. The figures continued to advance, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles. And then, just as they were about to reach me, the ground beneath my feet gave way, and I fell into darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the cold, hard ground. The town was gone, and I was surrounded by dense, impenetrable forest. The sun was rising, casting a pale light through the trees, and the air was filled with the sound of birdsong. I sat up, my head spinning, and tried to make sense of what had happened. Had it all been a dream? A hallucination? But as I looked down at my hands, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My skin was pale, almost translucent, and my fingers were unnaturally long. I stumbled to my feet and began to run, desperate to escape the forest and the memories of the town that existed only at night. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the figures from Black Hollow were still with me, their whispers echoing in my mind. And as the sun set and the shadows grew long, I realized with a sinking feeling that I would never truly escape. Because Black Hollow wasn't just a town, it was a curse, a place that existed outside of time and space, a place that would always find a way to pull you back in. And now, it had claimed me as its own. Years have passed since that night, and I have never been able to find my way back to Black Hollow. But sometimes, when the moon is full and the air is cold, I catch a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting image of a town bathed in moonlight, its streets empty and its windows dark. And I know that one day, when the time is right, it will call to me again, and I will have no choice but to answer. Because Black Hollow is not just a town. It is a living, breathing entity, a place that exists only at night, and only for those who are unlucky enough to find it. And once you do, there is no escape.